Hi, everybody. We're here today to talk about the conservative tide that happens in modern America, especially around the 80s. We're going to deal with Tennessee U.S. History Standards 105, 106, and 109, which is dealing with the significant achievements of the Reagan administration, the George H.W. Bush administration, and dealing with the foreign policy of the United States, especially when it comes to keeping peace in the Middle East. All right, so Ronald Reagan gets elected, okay, and he is a Republican president that believed that Americans needed to believe in themselves again. Um, there's a lot of kind of disillusionment that happens after during and after the Cold War. Reagan's campaign slogan was "Make America Great." Okay, he supported deregulation, which is making the government smaller. Okay, cut the rules, cut the taxes, cut regulations. Okay, make things easier to get done, which is going to end up biting us in the butt because then companies start doing things they're not supposed to. He was known as the great communicator. Ronald Reagan was an actor. He was a famous actor. So he was very well spoken. That should be spoken, not spoke. Sorry. He had the acting background. He was known for simplifying issues. Okay. He could really take an issue and make it to where anyone could understand it. He was also very good at giving clear answers. He didn't talk around things. Um, so people liked the way he talked and communicated because they could understand him. He came up with a new type of economics called Reaganomics or supply side economics. He said we're going to cut the taxes. That would benefit the economy because if we cut the taxes, then businesses have more money and they'll create more jobs. This is another form of trickle down economics. Doesn't work very well. He's also going to increase defense spending to protect us during the Cold War. There's a small problem with this. When you cut taxes, the government is not making as much money. So he said, we're going to make less money, but we're going to spend more. And that's going to create a huge government deficit. It's going to mean that we are going into more and more and more debt. This is one of those memes, I guess you could say. These are all high-ranking members of the Reagan administration. Here's Reagan. Okay, here's his vice president. It says Reaganomics. We told them the wealth would trickle down. Okay, it really didn't. I mean, it's not like they. This is not what they were laughing about. Okay, they don't actually. They really did think it would work. It just didn't. All right. So how do you fix the economy? Okay. So he has to try to make up for that deficit somewhere. He has to try to cut spending somewhere. If you're going to increase your spending in the military or in defense, and you've got to decrease it somewhere else so it balances out. And he wanted to cut entitlement programs. A lot of these programs are things that have just been put in place or that are left over from the New Deal that were put in place to help people. Entitlement programs are, they sound kind of high and toity. Oh, I'm entitled. But what all they are is they're programs that are put in place to help people who can't help themselves. They cost about $300 billion a year at the time. So he wanted to cut spending on things like food stamps, welfare, job training, school lunch programs, and Medicaid. So basically, he wanted to give less money to people for food stamps, less money to people who were on welfare. Welfare included the people who were on disability, by the way. He wanted to cut job training programs, which is something that Johnson had put into play as part of the war on poverty. He wanted to cut free and reduced lunches. So kids had to pay for their own lunches or bring their own. Only that he cut food stamp spending too, so the parents can't really afford the food to bring them to school. And he wanted to cut spending on Medicaid, which was that kind of TennCare type stuff. It was that health insurance to people who are too poor to buy health insurance for themselves. What really happened? Okay, this is historically what actually happened with his economic spending. His tax cuts helped the rich. Okay, the entitlement cuts hurt the poor. So you're going to have large budget deficits that keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, that is putting the country in more and more debt. So whenever you want to talk about our debt, it's not, it's not anyone recent. It's not or George W. Bush. It's not, okay, it is a little bit George W. Bush, but it's not just Bush and Obama that created the debt we're in. It really was Reagan. Okay. We were spending more money than we were taking in. This is also when poor people start to turn towards the Democratic Party, because it's the Reagan administration that hurt them. Okay. One of the money programs, one of the programs he put money into at first, was called the Strategic Defense Initiative. People called it Star Wars. It was an anti-missile defense system. So if we ever got bombed by the Soviet Union, theoretically, we would be able to shoot that bomb down while it was in space. The estimated final cost of this program would be trillions. So it never gets completed. Okay. You have Sandra Day O'Connor, who is the first female Supreme Court justice, is appointed by Ronald Reagan in 1981. You need to know that. Okay. This is her being sworn in. You have a new right movement. Okay. It's not just the standard GOP, Grand Old Party Republicans versus the standard Democrats anymore. You now have a new, not really alt-right, but you have a new branch of the Republican Party that is a grassroots movement. It's calling for smaller government and conservative policies here. So this is when you start to get the Republicans that are not just conservative with money, they're also conservative when it comes to human beings. Okay. They wanted consolidation of political power when it comes to certain things. So these are the two groups that make up that new right. You have the Conservative Coalition, which is a political alliance made up of Republicans. These generally the members of this were business leaders, middle-class voters, fundamentalist Christian groups. Okay. Then you have the Moral Majority, who wanted the government to start regulating people's individual lives based on the Bible. These people generally were evangelical and fundamental Christians. They interpreted the Bible literally, which means they think everything that was written in the Bible literally happened. None of it's metaphor. They also had an absolute standard of right and wrong. This is right, this is wrong. There is no gray area here. Okay. Under Reagan, you have the Iran-Contra scandal. This is really going to hurt Reagan. The guy who's behind it is a general named Oliver North. Okay. And what's going to happen is the Lebanon, the country Lebanon, takes 7 U.S. hostages. And in order to get them back, we need to pay them something. But we don't, what's the word I'm looking for? We don't negotiate with terrorists, so we can't technically do that. So Reagan sold weapons to Iran and then used that sale to help Lebanon. Okay, it's kind of a circular thing they did to get those 7 hostages released. When it's found out, Oliver North gets called in front of Congress to testify, and the big headline quote was this. It was, "I was authorized to do everything that I did." Right? I had permission. I was told to do it. Okay, Reagan knew about it. And people are going to get really shocked by this because we do not negotiate with terrorists. And we just sold missiles. We just sold weapons to the enemy. What? No, we're not supposed to do that. Okay. You also have cities decaying because those entitlement programs that were keeping them going have been cut. So you've got poor whites and minorities that are hurt the most by this. You're going to have very high levels of unemployment. Cities are going to become divided by economic status. You're going to have the poor section of the city, the middle class section of the city, and the rich section of the city. Poverty is going to become what's called feminized. 31% of households, so almost a third of households, were headed by single mothers. Okay, this is when that starts to happen in the 80s. And a lot of that is because women become the sole breadwinners, because you could pay women less still. I mean, technically not on paper you can, but they can get away with it. So women are getting paid less for doing the same job. So they end up are the ones that are getting employed, which leads to fights with their husbands who are unemployed, which leads to divorces. Okay. Then you have the AIDS virus is gonna come about in the 80s. It's one of the biggest issues of the 1980s. AIDS at its deadliest. Okay, these are percentages of populations infected with HIV in the worst hit regions. Worst hit regions were going to be Africa because they don't have access to healthcare or anything you can use to keep from spreading AIDS. Okay, so Zambia, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, South Africa, okay, Swaziland. All of these, more than 10% of the population was infected. Okay, this becomes a worldwide epidemic, and it's going to become associated with the gay community. It was not a gay thing, but it becomes associated with the gay community because most gay people at the time were not out, which means that whenever they were involved in a relationship, they were hiding it. And because they were hiding it and they felt ashamed, they weren't being as safe as they should be. And that's going to lead to the spread. Okay. War on drugs. You have Nancy Reagan. Every first lady has their own kind of program, right? Michelle Obama, or let's go back further. Hillary Clinton, when she was first lady, hers was TennCare, getting TennCare done. Michelle Obama's was making people healthier. Melania Trump's is anti-bullying. Nancy Reagan's was no drugs. Okay. She toured the country on an anti-drug campaign where the saying was just say no. When you're offered drugs, just say no. You don't have to take it. Okay. Then the next president to come about is George H.W. Bush. This is George W. Bush's father. He was the vice president to Ronald Reagan. He's going to go down the exact same path as Reagan. Okay. He comes up with this program called 1,000 Points of Light, which was supposed to be volunteer organizations that gave back to the communities that were breaking down and taking time to protect the innocent. So this is very much a Hoover rugged individualism idea, right? So it's not just the government's not going to give you money. The government's not going to help you pay for your kids' lunches, but maybe you can find a volunteer organization that will give your kid a lunch. Okay. We invade Panama in 1989 to arrest this guy. His name is General Noriega, who was a big drug trafficker. Okay. This is kind of one of the high points of the war on drugs at the time. Okay. We get him. At the end of the Cold War, Mikhail Gorbachev, okay, he recognized that better relations with the United States would allow the Soviet Union to spend less time on its military and more time on its people. So he made this decision. He made this decision to help his people. Okay, his two programs he wanted to put in was Perestroika, which was reconstructing the Soviet society, making it a better, more well-functioning society, and Glasnost, which was openness. So he's going to show everyone what he's doing. The big problem he's going to come up against is by this point, the Soviet government is notoriously corrupt. So you've got all these people, you got a very few amount of people with all the power, and they are not going to be good with being open about it, and they are really not going to be good with giving up any of their power. Okay. Germany gets reunified. It becomes, instead of East Germany and West Germany, there is one Germany now, which means they take down that wall around West Berlin. Germany reunifies. There is now free passage from East Germany into West Germany for the first time in 28 years. And this is the symbol of the end of the Cold War. This is what most people think of as the symbol. And guys, these people, they were not waiting for the machines to come. Once they got word that this wall was coming down, you had people start taking sledgehammers to this wall to break it through, or start to break through it. The war we are in Iraq today is not the first time we've been in a war in Iraq. We were in Iraq in the early 1990s. We invaded Kuwait because we wanted their oil and we wanted access to the Persian Gulf. Okay. We called this Operation Desert Shield or Desert Storm. There's two different operations we go through. The U.S. helped protect the Middle East oil fields, and we liberated Kuwait. Okay. So we created a free Kuwait, and we get to protect the Middle East oil fields because we need their oil. You have General Norman Schwarzkopf, this guy. Okay. He's the one who leads the ground forces and invasion against Iraq. And he called it the 100 Hours War, right? Because he, bam, got it done real quick. Okay. And that is it.